Welcome to Shorr Solutions, the podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Mara Shorr. I'm a partner in the medical practice management company, yes, Shorr Solutions. Who's the other host, you may ask? Easy answer. That would be my father, our founding partner, Jay Shorr. Together, we now have an amazing team and clients across the country. Listen as we chat, converse, strategize, and commiserate over life in the aesthetic medical industry. It's time for you to listen, learn, and be inspired as we help you kickstart your practice, because who doesn't want a little more help? Welcome to Shorr Solutions, the podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Mara Shorr, and the other glorious co-host who just took a big, giant, deep breath because, well, let's be honest, this topic is going to require taking a big, giant, deep breath, is our founding partner, my father, Jay Shorr. So say hello, Jay.
How do you do this?
Jay, for anyone that can't see, Jay's trying to do the heart with his fingers.
It's
It
arthritic.
looks a little more like a kidney, but that's okay. You're getting there. So we're going to give him some grace on that. So I kidney you too, Jay. With that, we are going to talk this morning or afternoon, depending on what time you're listening to this podcast.
The reason I had to do the kidney now that we're talking about theft is because you always steal my heart.
Oh, thought it's because you got to be kidding me. Okay. Yes. I'm often told by our teenager that I've got the mom jokes. And then Russ, my husband, said, no, she's been doing this since she was like 20. So there we go. I come by it honestly, Jay. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about top signs there could be theft in your office. So this is really a topic that requires a great big deep sigh. We once heard Dr. Steve Diane say the infamous line of, if you haven't been stolen from, you just haven't been in practice long enough. And he wasn't the one that came up with that line, but it's just always stuck with me. And Jay has been lecturing on theft for, well, as long as I can remember, not just lecturing me on theft as his daughter, but lecturing about theft prevention. And so let's go ahead, Jay, we're just going to dive right in. The top thing I think to note would be that theft, so often people think theft is just money, right? It's stealing of money, but we're going to talk a little bit about stealing of money, stealing of time, stealing of office supplies, stealing of medical resources. There's stealing of prescription pads in the days when you had to physically still write a physical hard prescription. Jay, it's your choice. Which of these glorious and very optimistic types would you like to start with talking about?
We will get to another type of theft, and that's stealing of patients.
Oh, yes, that's a good one too.
So most of the time, people think of stealing and theft. I always call it safety, health, security, fraud, and embezzlement, which much of my career I've worked with. And here's the thing. If you don't have processes in place to uncover potential, perspective, or actual theft, then you have to have zero tolerance items. And to me, zero tolerance items are alcohol on the job, drugs on the job, theft, patient and employee staff insubordination. There are zero tolerance items. A lot of other things I will put up with, but stealing of time as well. And we can go on to each one of these things. And I caution people and I caution practices that seriously, if you don't have processes in place, what is a process? Not necessarily a protocol, but what's a process? A process are security cameras. And I actually just came back from a site visit recently where a staff member was terminated and we had suspected theft. And lo and behold, the cameras had been moved. Now you understand the camera that goes over the cash box, the camera that goes over the product display, the camera goes over inventory.
And I am going to chime in here, Jay, and just note for anyone that's wondering, no, you cannot have cameras in the actual patient treatment rooms, and you cannot have cameras in bathrooms. So we always want to make sure that this, when we talk about theft prevention and cameras, this excludes those areas. So
Now, let me put a caveat on that. I will not put a caveat on the bathroom, all right, the lavatory, because that should never. But there can be cameras inside an exam room and an operatory with consent from the patient, because sometimes we do videos. That's a camera. But the physical security camera is what Mara's talking about without a patient's consent for obvious reasons. Sometimes we should. And I'll give you the example of why we should. And, I am never embarrassed to share some of the nightmares and horror stories that went on in my own practice. And now that I refer to my own practice, naturally, I have to make a disclaimer. When I say my own practice, it's because I was a partner in a very large dermatology plastic surgery practice here in Florida. I am not a physician. And in Florida, unlike California and some other states, you don't have to be a physician to own or be a partner. And we're doing a laser treatment on a patient, and they left their purse on a chair. They had the darkened goggles because of the laser. And lo and behold, when the doctor was in another room getting ready to come to this room, the medical assistant was preparing that patient. Unfortunately, the medical assistant helped themselves to money inside the patient's purse. It was not uncovered until the patient went to pay and realized they had just come from an ATM to take out cash to pay for the procedure. The patient said, "I think somebody was in my purse while I was in the room." It was very easy to limit down who was in the room. However, we couldn't see it and there was no proof. Had there been a security camera in the room, that would have been fine. However, many times in the room, this happened to have been a laser procedure on the face, so it could have been okay. But as you well know, many times there are patients that disrobe and other parts of the body are exposed, and they would not consent to have that filmed or under security. So you have to be very, very careful. So let's go to the first one that everybody thinks about: cash.
cash. And Jay, I want to make sure I'm going to be the keeper of a few notes here, because unfortunately, every time you're bringing these up, I go, ooh, I want to make sure Jay tells this horror story. And the reason, for those of you that are listening, is number one, Jay has been doing this a very long time, right? So Jay has been in this industry, gosh, I'd say it's 25 years now. In this particular industry, I'm not even talking about health and safety and OSHA and your paramedic days, right? Jay's been in this industry a very long time. And so in that time, we've seen anything from pretty ridiculous to pretty horrific when it comes to that. All of these horrible things didn't happen to Jay just in the course of like 13 months, right? It's not that just Jay had his blinders on. So Jay, I want to let you know, I'm making some notes here about things I'm going to say. Hey, Jay, why don't you tell the story of that time when? So
Okay. So first, it can be money. When you're stealing money, that's money out of the cash drawer. That's literal money, but a lot of other points of theft actually relate to money. Example: a practitioner is performing a procedure in the room, collecting in the room, maybe discounting the procedure and allowing the patient to pay an exorbitant tip. This happened about a year and a half ago to another client, where the PA kind of convinced the doctor to take credit card system like a restaurant that had the line tip, gratuity. And this way, the patients were allowed to leave a tip, kind of like a massage parlor, where you tip the therapist. And many of the massage parlors that I've been to, they actually have an envelope, not to mention, but like Massage Envy, and they have an envelope at the front when you go to pay, and you can give a gratuity to the massage therapist who actually gave you that massage.
yeah, you're starting to date yourself when people use this thing called cash. I don't know what you're talking about, Jay. What is this thing?
Well, I'll
cash.
tell you, there are people that still use cash. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong that are in cash businesses, and there are
Yes.
other reasons for that.
Yes.
Now, that becomes another form of theft.
It is, but Jay, since you are talking about taking payment in the room, I'm going to interject here. We've seen practices that we've worked with, and with look, the gloriousness that is being able to chart on whether it's an iPad or another form of a tablet, right? But a mobile device that makes it incredibly easy. So we've seen a number of our clients that they take that in, they scribe, they take notes, they chart, etc. Right? But we've seen several practices because now whether it's Square or your other credit card processor that goes into that particular device. And so to make it quote unquote easy on everybody, we've seen practices that take payments in the room very legally, like that is part of their process. But what are your thoughts on letting the provider take the payment inside of a treatment room instead of checking out at a front desk? What are your thoughts there as in regards to how it could potentially open up a practice for theft?
Well, depending upon space limitations, there's many reasons people do it. We have clients that work out of single or double suites where they don't have a check-in, check-out. It's kind of like a shared office space or a Phoenix suite or something similar to that. And for those of you who don't know it, they're co-share office spaces basically. And you go in and there's a common area that might be a reception area. They're not necessarily yours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only for a common waiting room or reception area, but everything is done within the personal suite. It's kind of like many, many years ago, I had a second office that was inside a medical spa. We owned the medical spa portion, but there was manicure, pedicure, hairdressers, and they rented chairs, and we owned the second floor. All right. That was for dermatology and cosmetic and plastic surgery. And what ended up happening is some of these would take payments in the room. Now, if the owner is the one taking payments in the room, I have absolutely zero issues and
Sure.
concerns with
Sure.
that. If it's a provider, I always have my concerns, and I'm not saying that every provider is disingenuous. I'm trying to say that I always have my eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's a little bit for me and the rest for you. And I want to make sure, because when that provider is taking money in the room, we don't know that the full amount is being accepted, the full amount is being charged, because sometimes there are deals that are made legitimately, but we don't know. As I was trying to explain, the deal in the room where the credit card allowed for tips, well, the provider actually charged less for the procedure so that the patient could give a tip. Now, when you have a $350 procedure that's normally $500, and you see a $350 procedure with a $100 tip, therefore the patient got a $50 discount.
And
All
again,
right.
when Jay says, this is just putting on could this be misinterpreted? When he says tip, he means gratuity, not like a laser tip. He means,
Right.
Right.
So it was a $350 procedure, a $100 gratuity, and still the patient got a $50 discount. All the patient knew is they paid $50 less, and hereby the provider got a $100 tip. I think it waves a redder flag than the red on my shirt. All right. I understand 15%, 20%. I kind of think that gratuities to providers outside of estheticians is wrong. That's Jay's opinion. All right.
And Jay, I know we always hate to try and like cut each other short as far as how much time we actually have on these podcasts, but I have so many things that I want you to answer on this. So I'm purposely going to bring up a new one.
Yeah, but let me get to one other one. Mara and I were on a site visit one time.
Oh, this is a good one. Yes.
In Orlando, Florida. And we happened to have been speaking to a PA. And what we were doing is auditing, and we found out that there were thermage tips missing. Now, understand, every time you perform a procedure with a thermage, there's a tip and there's a cost to a tip. And we found out, doesn't matter how we found out, that the PA worked at another two facilities. He was helping himself to additional thermage tips that he was using at another facility. He was charging the provider the cost of the tip that he helped himself to, that the first provider that we were doing a site visit for paid for, and then he was getting paid for the procedure. Being paid for the procedure in another practice is not theft. There wasn't a non-compete. It was an independent contractor. However, he did steal the tip. The answer that when we brought it up, because we said, well, we have a spreadsheet that we've created that we have to list the tip. The tip has to be numbered like every syringe of a filler and a box of neurotoxins bottle, so that we know where every unit went, where every syringe went, and we couldn't find these tips. The provider said, I make enough money, I can't be bothered with some of that.
Well, this was the owner.
The owner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the owner.
Unfortunately, that owner is out of business today. All right, seriously. And it's because of that plus other things. They were diverting patients to another practice. That's another form of theft. And that has to be for non-solicitation in clauses when you hire people. That's a whole other webinar, by the way. So be careful, because it is consumables, disposables that people are taking from the office that the owner paid for, another form of theft.
And Jay, just, I don't know if we want to say adjacent to that or related to that, right? Whichever word we're going to go with, as you call it. Anyone that's ever listened, it is no secret, I am Jay's daughter. Therefore, over my 39, almost 40 years, I have just really taken on a lot of Jayisms. So sometimes much to Jay's dismay, but often he finds it to be ridiculously hilarious. But with that being said, let's talk, Jay, about, as you phrase it, an employee running a business within your business. And so that is part of what you were talking about. But let's talk about some, for example, injectables that do need to be reconstituted or they need to be diluted, and how we have seen theft with syringes that are filled with product that have walked away. How we have seen a little for you, a little for me, and they've gone on to take the product from the bottle or the vial and take it home and go on to sell that to another patient. And then you even saw that a number of years ago in your own practice when you saw a slew of non-responders. So I'm giving all the spoiler alerts here, but let's go ahead and talk about some of those instances. Yes, we are going to take a slight break, a slight intermission, because what kind of business would we be if we didn't tell you about our own services? I want to take a minute and talk to you about the Conversion Cascade course and all that it has to offer. We want you to be trained to acquire loyal patients and boost your revenue in your aesthetic practice. Now, with our Conversion Cascade online course, you and your team will be able to master 2 key things important to growing your aesthetic practice and becoming successful: acquiring patients and retaining new patients. So let's talk about a couple of things. As a step-by-step sales funnel training, the course is designed specifically to help you and your team attract more patients, convert more calls to consults, convert consults to treatments and procedures, and to keep your patients coming back for more. Not only will our Conversion Cascade course help to strengthen and develop your team's phone and sales skills in order to acquire, convert, and retain loyal patients, it will serve as a valuable onboarding training tool for every new team member that joins your practice. Yes, every new team member that joins your practice. Plus, in the course, you will receive downloadable marketing checklists, phone scripts, conversion tracking tools, and more. So sign up for the course to get started on increasing your revenue and acquiring and retaining new and existing patients. Yes, how to acquire and how to keep them coming back for more. It only takes approximately 4 hours to complete. You can finish it at your own pace and you'll have lifetime access. Yes, that is for the lifetime of the course. And a special thank you for being our podcast listener. We'll give you 20% off. Yes, 20% off. Just enter the discount code podcast. Yes, podcast, to start saving now. So click on the link in our show notes to sign up for the Conversion Cascade online course and start acquiring more patients now.
Okay, so let me share 2 ways. First, the provider that is not the owner, because there would be no incentive for the owner to do this. You don't steal from yourself,
Right.
actually.
Right.
But I'm going to give you a couple examples. A provider, let's say it's another doctor, it's a PA, it's a nurse practitioner, or whatever. They actually overcharge a patient, all right, so that the provider would never know. So instead of 20 units, they charge the patient for 30 units. And that's why I've always been against charging by the unit for a neurotoxin. And people are going to say, Jay, you're crazy. We've always done it that way. But I was always charging a patient by the area. Now, then you can say, well, how do I know how many units went into those areas? Well, what happened was that they would charge the patient for an excessive amount of units, and the provider would take the difference between what they actually used and what they said they used, and take those 10 units, 5 units, another 10 units, another 5 units. If you're doing 5 to 10 patients in a day, and the next thing you know, you've got a little stockpile at home, and then you're treating friends and family, or you're taking people from the office and saying, I'll charge you, if you're doing it by the unit, $8 a unit, $7 a unit. And people are going to say, well, how are they charging $7 a unit when it costs a little over $6?
Well, they got that product for free.
It didn't cost any a unit because they stole it. All right. The other side of the coin was the old teenage, young adolescent water in the vodka bottle. When you were having parties and you stole the vodka from your mom and dad, and then you filled it with water to make it look like nothing was taken. And then what ended up happening is we ended up getting an inordinate amount of non-responders. So
Jay, for the record, I was never able to do that because you don't drink vodka. Just like to clear that up. I couldn't do that as a kid.
All the vodka in our house was still sealed with the label. They were props, actually. But what ended up happening is they would dilute with saline, and we called the company that sold us the neurotoxin. I'm not going to mention any names because there's several. And they said, send us the bottle that because it was a specific lot number. You know that if you order 25 bottles at one time, they're all going to have the same lot number. And if you order 25 today and maybe 10 tomorrow, the 10 tomorrow might be different in production. We ended up finding that the company told us that it was so over diluted that they were shocked that there was any response. And of course, because there were non-responders, since we charge by the area, we guaranteed that you'll respond. And we just kept injecting and injecting. But when it happened over and over and over again, look, there can be a person that doesn't respond. It just can happen. But when it's multiple people who don't respond from the same lot number, we found it inherent to contact the manufacturer. So that's another way.
So Jay, here's a question. As you always say, this is a loaded question. Have you ever had a Botox bottle break when you drop it, let alone several, and that's why they disappear?
Or Jeuveau or Dysport.
Yes, I'm sorry. Any product that comes in a glass container, right? Any sort of glass container. Have you ever had them just keep breaking on you regularly?
I have to tell you, I'm not going to sit here and speak that it is impossible. It has never happened to me. And I have dropped
frequently.
And I have dropped bottles. And I have found, honestly, the bottles actually bounced. They didn't drop like a glass or a light bulb and shatter.
Right.
But once again, we had a practice that we were consulting for. And the PA did off-site events on behalf of the client, by the way, and shared that a couple bottles broke. They dropped them, they went to their arm dropped and the bottles broke. And they didn't bring the glass back. They just said that they threw it away and all the product was missing. This happened to be the same person, by the way, that added the tips on with the new credit card processing machine. I have never seen a bottle of the neurotoxins break and lose all the product. I just haven't. If that is the case, then do me a favor And I used to be in the supermarket business, by the way, before I got into this. And if we dropped products or they broke with the tops still sealed, the manufacturer said, if you give us the bottle, the glass with the top on it, we'll give you credit for it. It was an RTV, a return to vendor. All I want to know is bring me the bottle back with the top before you pop it to get out whatever 1/10 or 2/10 is left in the bottle. And now what happened? That's $1,000 or more, because 100 units or 300 units at whatever you're charging per unit is about maybe $1,000. If you're charging $10 a unit, $12 a unit, 100 units, $1,000 to $1,200. This is what this practitioner stole from the owner. So these are different ways. Or I've heard, and this has happened, by the way, they didn't put the needle on tight enough on the syringe and they were injecting and the needle popped off of the syringe and they alleged that all the product shot out. Okay. I can't doubt that this can't happen, but when these things happen over and over again in a practice, the red light goes on. And I mean the red light, redder than my shirt.
Right. There's a big old red flag in that. As we are starting to approach the end of this particular conversation, and I will share with you that Jay and I could go on forever on this. If you've ever spoken with us on a regular basis, our clients know this. We are so strong when it comes to theft prevention because of all the reasons you have just heard, where we have seen so many examples, both with our own practice, when we are consulting with clients. And so I think it's something when you continue to see very interesting ways, we'll call them creative, when there's very creative ways for theft opportunity, we always are overcautious. Jay calls himself, what is it? And a pessimistic optimist, right? That's what Jay always.
I'm an optimistic pessimist.
Oh no, I thought it was the other way around.
It is the other way around.
Depends on the day.
It's a pessimistic optimist because I always look at the negative side of every positive situation.
And that's our job. When we go into a practice, that's our job and our role. But what I will say is that all of these things that we've just talked about, this is all the more reason to make sure you have very strong inventory control, whether that is an old school spreadsheet that you're using, whether that is inventory within your practice management, your EMR system, right? We want to make sure, and so many of them offer this now, but really talk to the companies you're working with about their inventory control. And then also making sure somebody is regularly reviewing your financials as well. And I recommend a third party, whether that is your accountant, whether that is a consultant. We do this for our clients, right? This is our podcast, Jay. We're allowed to say that this is something we do for our clients. We do this so that, as Jay says, the fox isn't watching, right? And we don't have somebody that could potentially be stealing and somebody that never wants to open the books for anybody. And then therefore we go, that's a bit of a red flag, right? So we want to make sure that there is somebody that it's not the fox watching the hen house situation. And really there's a third party looking at financials, looking at inventory control systems, and even sometimes having somebody review camera footage if there is any really discretion or discrepancy, I should say. So there is a reason, guys, that we are so big on policies, procedures, and control.
I want to caution.
Yeah.
I really want to caution a practice owner, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because I can't tell you how many times I have uncovered theft in multiple ways, whether it is theft of the money, the procedure was performed, it was entered into the EMR, EHR, then if it was paid by cash, by the way, and then deleted, and the cash taken from the procedure, because when you do your final daily tally at the end of the day, the procedure that was deleted won't show, and therefore the provider or the front desk person may have taken that money. It happened to me. Believe me, of all the things and controls I had in place, I created all these controls by things that happened to me. And I'm not embarrassed to share them because that's what made me stronger. And I caution you all, that when you want to put a process in place for prevention of these items, and your staff gives you the excuse that they're too busy to do these processes, that it's just another step. That's the first red flag, redder than this shirt, all right?
In case anyone that hasn't watching the video hasn't guessed, if you're just listening to this, Jay has on a shirt with red stripes in it. So if anyone can't see, Jay does indeed have a red striped shirt.
I figured anyone that's just listening would figure that out by now.
Yeah.
However, the person who fights you by putting on, we have spreadsheets that can go in the cloud or servers, for those of you who still have servers still, that if they say it's just too busy because these spreadsheets are done in real time and they can be audited by anybody, us included, and when they say they don't have time, that's one of the first things that you've got somebody here, because an honest person wants the control to make sure that there's no accusations against them. I always loved having secured measures in place because it eliminated the possibility of me being accused in any situation of being one of the people that are going to be investigated for theft. And I do this all the time. And I go in and sometimes it's just too late. And what do I say to the client? Be done with the staff member. And unless it's egregious and tens of thousands of dollars, walk away from it after you fire them, because it's going to be a thorn in your side, hours of lost sleep at night. And if you're going to go prosecute them, it's going to take forever. 9 times out of 10, the person is not going to be prosecuted. You're not going to get your inventory back. You're not going to be made whole. And it took a part of your life away. Put the processes in place and make sure that the red flags that you see are implemented, and hire people to audit you and to make sure that you're not being stolen from. It is your money. It's your hard work. The only thing theft does is not have to pay taxes on the monies that's stolen from you if it wasn't accounted for. And nobody wants to not pay taxes that way. The last thing I want to caution you about is people who pay cash. Cash legally must hit the books. And you will hear people say that they wait until they get an abundance of cash and then take it to the bank. I am so against that, because I believe cash needs to be deposited every day, because how much cash was received that day, the audit trail is how much money got deposited that day. And if you only go to the bank every couple days, then make a separate deposit that day, even if it didn't get to the bank, of that cash, and another deposit the next day of that cash, so that when you get to the bank, even though it might be once or twice in that week, they're all multiple deposits that had that cash for the audit trail of what was received that day. And these are processes in place that you need to put together.
And with that, we wrap up another episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. We hope that we have not only inspired you, but maybe scared the pants off of you just a little bit more. Thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to have you join us again. So that wraps up today's episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. If we mentioned any web links, you can find them in our show notes. To work directly with me, Jay, and our award-winning team of consultants to increase your practice's efficiency, increase revenue, and decrease costs in your aesthetic practice, schedule a free consult with us today. We will help you establish and refine your aesthetic practice's protocols for maximum efficiency and productivity, decrease your expenses, and increase profit with our expert financial analysis of your practice. Attract more patients, convert calls to consults, convert consults to treatments, and keep patients coming back for more with our sales coaching and complimentary access to our Conversion Cascade online course. Recruit, hire, and improve your team members and manage any staff turnover with our human resource expertise, plus so much more. Head on over to the show notes and click on the link to schedule a free 30-minute consult with us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to spread the word and share this episode or one of your other favorites with your friends, colleagues, and the rest of your team. Remember to follow us on social media at Shorr Solutions and sign up for our e-newsletter. You'll learn all about our latest tips, tricks, blog posts, service announcements, videos, webinars, and more. Link to our social media channels and to sign up for our e-newsletter are, yep, you got it, in the show notes. See you next time. And remember, leave us a review and subscribe to our podcast for more incredible content. Thanks so much.